Welcome to Christspiracy, the channel where we tackle misconceptions and uncover the truth about Christianity. Today, I wanted to go over every single denomination. There are some denominations that aren't real denominations, but they're sort of denominations within denominations. And I want to give my opinion on them and rank them accordingly. This is technically a tier list, but I really want to focus more on what I actually think of the denomination. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys understand the points that I make in this video, as well as letting me know where you disagree and what you agree with. All right, let's go and get started with African initiated churches. I don't even know what this is. If I don't know what it is, I'm just gonna not put it on there. So I'm just setting that now for future reference. This is in alphabetical order, so this is gonna be interesting. All right, first real option we have here is we have Anglican Catholic. I would put Anglo-Catholic probably in like C tier because I do like Anglicanism, but the fact that it prioritizes Catholic theology over mainly Protestant theology or other denomination theology is why I'd only put it in C tier. I would still say I like this better than actual Catholicism because they still believe in sola scriptura, but it's not really much better, I would say. Next, we got Evangelical Anglican. I'm going to be putting it in B tier, slightly better than Anglo-Catholic. It's not super great theologically wise, but it is still Anglican, and there's not really much going on with that. And there's a big problem with lack of evangelicalism in mainline Protestant denominations. So next, we got High Anglican, aka just regular Anglican. Normally, before I would have put this in A tier, but I'm going to put this in S tier actually. I've grown, as you could tell with my last video, I've grown a lot more respect for the Anglican denomination. I love the ecumenicalism despite the differences. I love the high churchness, not preferable, but it is still way better than low church or no church. So definitely can't complain there. And if you guys want to know more about what I think about the Anglicans, go watch my last video, obviously. Next, we got Reformed Anglican, which is S tier because it's also just Anglican, but it's got Reformed theology. I love Reformed theology. I'm a Presbyterian. Of course, I'm going to put this in A tier. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because I'm just going to talk about Reformed theology once I get to Presbyterian and Dutch Reformed. If it's on here, I can't remember. Next, we got Ancient Church of the East. I mean, what? I literally don't even know what that is. It doesn't sound great though. I do know the Syrian Church of the East, which is also going to go into the E tier though, because it feels kind of like a non-denominational version of Catholicism. Well, not necessarily Catholicism, but an ecclesialist denomination, which basically meaning there's a one true church and that denomination is the one true church. Their theology isn't inherently heretical or not Christian, but I would personally never ever join that denomination. So next we got Baptist, who I'm going to be putting in B tier, B for Baptist. I respect Baptists. I don't agree with most of their theology on secondary issues, but they do have an interesting mindset when it comes to the Bible. I do respect their view of the authority of Scripture. I respect how evangelical they are and how much they reach out to people while also being committed to their personal relationship with God. You probably know that Baptists have a high emphasis on their personal relationship with God. I think that's good, but we should not value it over church. I don't think I can comfortably put Baptist above B tier. They're very low church. I'm not a big fan of low church, and they have a very symbolic view of the sacraments, and I'm not a big fan of having purely symbolic sacraments. So next we got Armenian Catholic, who I'm going to be also putting in E tier. It's Armenians that are Catholic. For some reason, there's a lot of country and ethnical based Catholic denominations here. I'm not really sure why, but it is what it is. So the same thing's going to be going for the Byzantine Catholic, the Chaldean Catholic, the Alexandrian Catholic, and the Maronite Catholic, because they're all practically the same in my eyes. Slightly different theology, but generally the same. But then we got the big one, which is Roman Catholic, which is going to go in D tier slightly more, because at least with Roman Catholics, they have a more centralized view of what they think the one true church is, and they're the most popular one. Roman Catholics are, I would say, the best one true church denomination besides another one that we're going to get to later. I don't agree with most of their theology, more so than Baptists. I actually agree more with Baptist theology than Roman Catholicism because they don't have sola scriptura, which is really important to me. And they have a lot of infallible declarations outside of scripture, and they have heresies that aren't necessarily heresies, at least from Protestant perspective. I don't like papism. I don't like the idea of the Pope. I'm Protestant, obviously. That's kind of what being Protestant means. Yes, I can go on and on about what I don't like about Catholicism, but what do I like about Catholicism? I like that they are they have a high respect for the church. I like that they are unified. I like that they stick together with their beliefs, that they don't stray off into super crazy whatever. But probably the thing I respect most about Catholicism and hate about it at the same time is their determination to believe the same thing. If you don't believe something within the Catholic Church, then you are anathematized or called a heretic or whatever. If you're in the Catholic Church, you must believe every single infallible declaration, even if they contradict each other, which is why I also don't like it about it, because there are some things that the Catholic Church believes that I do not want to and cannot affirm. So next we got Syrian Catholic, same thing going there. My favorite denomination, Church of Christ, is going in. We got our first and one of our only F tiers. Church of Christ is like, it's practically non-denominational, but it's worse because they only stick to the Bible. They don't have any beliefs outside of the Bible, and that can cause a lot of heresies and stuff, as well as they can't affirm core Christian doctrine like the Trinity because the word Trinity is not in the Bible. There's a lot of things they can't believe because it's strictly not mentioned in the Bible, and I don't like that way of thinking at all because we need the church. So Church of Christ is somehow lower church than non-denominationals because at the very least non-denominationals have the idea that we need to come to a place to worship God, but Church of Christ more so seems like it's just kind of a place to gather for people that have this very specific belief. And I need to make my own separate video about why I don't like Church of Christ, but that's the simpleness of what I believe pretty much. Next, we got Russian and Greek Orthodox. I'm gonna count these together because they're both the same thing. I'd probably put these in E tier. I think I like Catholicism slightly more because I believe in the Filioque. Protestants are Western, so they're closer to Catholicism. And Eastern Orthodox has very strong beliefs that seem kind of like out of this world, out of place almost, that I could never really get behind. At the very least, I could say that every denomination that I put in E tier and higher, I believe is still at least technically Christian. F and heretical are where, well, F is where it's like, I genuinely don't know if they're Christian or not, and hereticals were just straight up, no, they're not Christian. So they're like barely Christian, I would say, is how I would put it personally. Next we got German Lutheran, S tier. I love Lutheran theology, exquisite. I'm mostly theologically Lutheran myself. They have a great view of the Eucharist. They have a great view of salvation. I love single predestination. It's absolutely phenomenal. I love how high they view baptism and the sacraments. I love the music. I love how their churches look. I mean, I really can't, there's very little I could say about Lutheranism besides, I don't know, they're not great at evangelicalism, and they're kind of liberal nowadays, but even then that's not necessarily true. So it's like, I have a harder time finding what I don't like about Lutheranism than what I do. So Lutheranism, easy S tier ranking here. Next we got the Mennonite, who I put in D tier because I have a respect for Anabaptists. I don't think that they're the ideal Christian denomination by any means, but I do like the thought process they have of trying to go back to the early Christians, trying to kind of mimic how they live. I think that's really respectable. I'm not really sure what their positions are in terms of church or theology, but I generally understand how they work, and from what I know, I'm going to have to put them in D tier. Let me know in the comments about Mennonites or Amish, because I don't know too much about them. Let me know if you think I should have ranked it higher or lower. but I think they're pretty cool, but I wouldn't recommend going to a Mennonite church if I were you. Next, we got Methodists, who I'm going to put in C tier. Methodists are awesome. They are mainline Protestant, but I don't like the Arminian view of salvation. That's a big problem for me, as well as with a couple of other denominations. Also, this is kind of a nitpick, but Methodists are way too nice. I'm not a super nice person. I just don't feel like I fit in with that crowd. Methodists are good. Become Methodist if that's what you feel like you're most drawn to. I personally wouldn't do it ever. I personally would never go to a Methodist church. But it's definitely a solid option, and I would recommend trying it out. Next, we got the Moravian Church, who is going in B tier. Moravians are super base. They're pretty much proto-Protestant, Protestant before Protestantism, the Reformation, if you will. They have really good, solid beliefs. I don't think they necessarily believe in the 5 solas because, like I said, they're pre-Protestant, pre-Reformation. But if you look, the more I've looked into the Moravian Church, the more I've grown to respect it. It seems really cool, and I would consider going to one of their churches someday if I could. While we're here in B tier, I'm actually just going to explain what I think of each letter. So S tier is, I would go to this denomination if I wasn't in my current denomination, or I highly agree with the theology, or mostly agree with the theology, and it's as close to Christianity as I prefer, is what I put in S tier. And A tier is, I would go to one of these denominations if none of these other denominations existed in S tier, and I think they're really good options. B tier is bottom of the barrel. I would go to everything below B tier. I would not personally ever go to or ever be. But I think they're solid denominations. C tier is, they're all right. There's a lot of problems with them, but they're not, like, I would still say that they're solidly Christian. D tier is, I would never go to one of these churches unless I was in a like rural area and it only had these kinds of churches, and most of their theology is either stupid or dumb, or I don't agree with it, but they are still Christian and have a right direction that they're leaning towards. E tier, I've already explained E tier, bottom of the barrel Christianity. This is technically Christian, but most of the stuff that they believe is really whack, and maybe even for some heretical. I wouldn't recommend joining any church below C tier, but if you absolutely feel like you're drawn to them, I'm not going to say no. Unless we get into F tier, which I would never recommend anybody go to these churches. I don't even know if I could consider them Christian. And heretical, obviously, they shouldn't even exist. I mean, F tier shouldn't exist either, but heretical definitely shouldn't exist because they're definitely not Christian. Got it? All right, let's keep moving on. Next, we got the Nazarene denomination, who I don't say, it's kind of tough. I kind of pair them with another denomination we'll get to later on. They're all right. They're not really Protestant. Technically, I guess they are, but they're kind of schismatic Protestants, and their beliefs are very like general, kind of Baptist, kind of non-denominational, kind of Pentecostal in their theology, I guess. They're all right. I think I'd probably personally be Roman Catholic over Nazarene, but I don't know for sure. It's a tough call to make for sure. By the way, I'm also going to say this at the end of this video. I'm going to go back and rearrange the order that they're in within the tiers, so I can give my kind of like final verdict, I guess. Next, we got non-denominational, which is also going in the D tier. I don't like non-denominationalism. It's definitely worse than Catholicism. Don't become non-denominational if you can help it. The only reason I don't put non-denominational E tier is because they have Baptist theology, and I already just said that I think Baptist theology is solid. Not great, not perfect, but solid. That's literally the only reason I would put them in the same tier. I'm sure a lot of Protestants and Catholics and Eastern Orthodox would put it lower, especially Eastern Orthodox, but that's just where I feel comfortable with it being. Worse than Catholic, but I wouldn't say that it's so bad that it's barely Christian, but it's getting there. It's on the road there, that's for sure. Next, we got a bit of a weird one. We got Old Catholic. I'm gonna put this in E tier because it's like Catholicism, but not as mainstream. It's another denomination I need to like look into more. It's one of those things where it's like I would rather just be Roman Catholic at that point. I'm not entirely sure what their motive is behind being their own like separate thing. But just be Roman Catholic at the point. So I'm kind of lumping it in with all these other Catholic denominations because, I mean, that's pretty much just what it is. Except I think Catholics themselves view old Catholics as lower than themselves, which is understandable, and I'm sure vice versa. Getting back into it, we got Coptic Orthodox, which I'm going to put in C tier. My favorite one true church denomination. They're pretty sick. They're pretty cool. They are very, very nice and very kind, and they've been persecuted over and over, time and again, and they still continue to push through and go forward in what they believe in and in the church. They're pretty awesome. If you're going to join a one true church, I'd recommend Coptic Orthodox. Roman Catholicism, a close second, I guess. The only reason I can't put it above C tier is because they don't believe in sola scriptura. That's a big problem for me. Next, we got Pentecostal, which I would put in D tier. Because they're like non-denominationals, but they're more spiritually focused than theology focused, and what theology they do have, I don't agree with for the most part. The only reason that they're not in E tier is because they're more mainstream, so they have a bigger emphasis on ecumenism, and they seem legit. Now, if there was like a Pentecostal, I'd put in the F, or heretical, probably heretical, is oneness Pentecostalism. That is just straight up like a cult, in my opinion. Don't really care for Pentecostals, wouldn't recommend joining one of their churches. Let's just move on. Next, we got Quaker, who are straight up heretical. They're not Christian in almost any sense of the word. They are very closed off from society, but like in a different way than Amish are. They don't believe in core Christian doctrine. Their church services are weird. Don't become Quaker if you want to become a Christian. Just don't do it. I don't even know why that's in here, but whatever. Next, we got Congregationalists, who I'm putting in C tier. I think their theology is pretty solid. They're mainline Protestant. That's a big upside for them. But there's just nothing that particularly stands out to me about them, theology-wise or church-wise. They're very unique for a mainline Protestant church, I would say, or churches, denomination, whatever. But I personally would never go to a congregation church unless I absolutely had to. But it's a solid option. I would recommend going. Same thing with Methodism. If you feel drawn to it, I highly recommend a Congregationalist. It's good. It's legit Christian. I just personally, but this is mostly just a personal preference choice right here. Next, we got the Dutch Reformed, who I'm going to put in A tier because well, they do have Reformed theology, and I love Reformed theology. Their church structure is a little bit worse than Presbyterianism, and in truth be told, I really just don't know much about Dutch Reformed. But they have Reformed theology. Hard to argue with that. Yeah, highly recommend becoming Dutch Reformed. If there's all the denominations I put in S tier, if they weren't there, Dutch Reformed is a really solid option and probably one I would be in. If you can't be Presbyterian, be Dutch Reformed. Speaking of Presbyterian, we got S tier because pretty much everything I just said about the Dutch Reformed, but crank it up to 1 million. They have a better church structure. They have the same theology, but I like the way that they structure it better. They have beautiful churches. They're a very American denomination. They are just absolutely wonderful. They're beautiful. They have great songs, great worship. Probably my favorite out of all the denominations, probably my favorite worship style. Like the most well-rounded, I would probably say, denomination. Lutheran theology I like better, but disregarding Lutheran theology, Presbyterian's definitely number one because of how, just like I said, just how well-rounded they are. They're like, boom, perfect in this, perfect in that, perfect in that, perfect in that. Yeah, no complaints. If you can go to a Presbyterian church, I absolutely 100% recommend it. Nothing else really needs to be said here. Next, we got Reformed Baptist, which I've gone back and forth with Reformed Baptist. They're a very confusing concept. But if I had to give them a ranking, I'd put them in B tier. I'd put them on the same tier with regular Baptists because it's basically just Baptist, but with some more Reformed ideas, and they call themselves Reformed despite not being Reformed. I mean, okay, it's still a Baptist church, though. This is more about the theology than the church that you go to, but at that point, just become Dutch Reformed or Presbyterian. I don't know why you need to LARP as a Reformed Baptist, just become Reformed. From what I heard, the biggest difference between Reformed Baptist and regular Baptist is, and Reformed Baptist and Reformed theology in general is that they just don't baptize babies because they don't think it's biblical. I'm pretty sure that's the only main difference. But most denominations say baptize your babies. Scripture seems like it says baptize your babies. Just baptize your babies, guys. Come on, it's not that hard to do. Next, we got Seventh-day Adventist. The heresies of all the heresies. I don't even know if Quakers identify as Christians, but Seventh-day Adventists, aka Mormons, absolutely do identify as Christian while denying core Christian doctrine. They're not Christian. If you want to be Christian, don't be a Mormon. They're their own. It's almost like a cult sect of Christianity. Just don't become Mormon. literally, any other option above Mormon on this list, do over Seventh-day Adventist. I'd even say go to Church of Christ over SDA, because at the very least, they like kind of care about Christianity core doctrine, I guess. But Mormons kind of just spit it in its face and made their own Bible, pretty much. Hey, that's not technically what it is, but that's what I'm saying. I'm just calling it as I see it, all right? Next, we have the Three Self-Patriotic Movement. Bro, I don't even... It's very weird. I'm going to put this denomination in the simplest terms that I can. Protestantism, but Chinese communist. That's what it is. It's communist, Chinese communist Protestantism. If you're in China and you're forced to go to this church, then go to it. That's the only scenario I could ever see me going to this church, is if I was forced to go because I lived in China. That's pretty much it. It's still better than no church, barely. I would say it's better than Church of Christ, but I'll go over that in my re-ranking. And last but not least, we have True Orthodox, which is also going in F tier because they're basically Eastern Orthodox, but they just use a different calendar. That's it. They pretty much exist because they thought regular Eastern Orthodoxy was becoming too liberal, accepting the Gregorian calendar, and so they just kind of stayed their own thing. It's generally accepted they split off from the regular Eastern Orthodox. So just why go to a true Orthodox church, and why not just go to a regular Eastern Orthodox church? Why not? There's no benefit to going to a true Orthodox church, and I really don't really care for the Eastern Orthodox church. So yeah, I don't really care too much. All right, now that we went over those rankings, I'm going to go within each letter specifically and rearrange the denominations that I prefer over the other ones within the same ranking. So in heretical, I actually like Quakers over the Mormons, but to be completely honest, I don't like either of them, so it's like whatever. I'm just gonna leave that alone. I'd be Three Self-Patriotic Movement and True Orthodox over Church of Christ. Church of Christ is like the lowest of the low, and True Orthodox is stupid. I just don't get it. Next we got a million Catholic stuff. I'd still put Assyrian Church of the East over all Catholics. I'm putting this in the bottom, and then I'll put this above EO. So Assyrian Church of the East, all these random Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, and then Ancient Church of the East, which is like, okay, cool, whatever. For D tier, I honestly probably would leave this the same. Roman Catholicism of these five are the best. Mennonite, Nazarene's all right, I guess. I'd rather be non-denominational because Pentecostal just feels like a worse version of Nazarene and non-denominational. Like, combine Nazarene non-denominational and make it slightly worse, and that's what you got, Pentecostalism. That's how it feels for me anyway. C tier is interesting. I put Congregationalist first, then Methodist, then Coptic Orthodox over Anglo-Catholic. Just because I don't really like the idea of Catholic LARPing in a Protestant denomination, but it's still better than being actual Catholic, so I'll take it, whatever. Coptic Orthodox is the best one true church. I just like Congregationalists over Methodists. I just do. That's just how it is. I like their theology better because it's different. It's kind of like Congregationalist is kind of like Anglicanism, but instead of it being centralized, it's like their own separate sects, kind of. Basically, is the best way to put it. For B tier, I'm going to put Moravian first, then No, I'll do Evangelical Anglican over Baptist, and then I guess Reformed Baptist over Baptist, but completely honest, they're interchangeable. I feel the same way about them pretty much. The only difference really is theology. They go to the same church practically, so yeah, these are interchangeable, but Moravian is definitely the best of these four, I would say, personally. There's no point in reorganizing any in A tier because it's A tier, or it's literally the only denomination in there, so. And finally for S tier, we got Presbyterian first, Lutheran second, and then Reformed Anglican over High Anglican, I guess, because I'm not the biggest fan of High Church, but they're still really based and awesome and cool. Reformed Anglican because I like Anglicans, I like Reformed theology, it just makes sense. Lutheran because they have the best theology, but Presbyterian because they're best all around, and I absolutely love Reformed theology as well. So this is my final ranking. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know I'm gonna get flamed in the comments for this list. I just wanted to share my opinion on each denomination so that you guys have a better understanding of what I think of them going on in the future when I talk about them. So if you ever are watching one of my videos talking about a specific denomination and you want to know how I truly feel, I'd recommend going back to this video and rewatching on my specific section for that denomination. I plan at some point in making a video about each denomination, how I feel about it, going in depth. But for now, I think this is a very good, simple way to do all of the denominations all at once. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and God bless.